Hey everybody, it's Brian Nemhauser, and we got the Hawk Blogger crew together again for a new edition of Real Hawk Talk. We had a big game last week, preseason game. They're all big against the Colts, and we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk a little bit about who's going to make the final 53. I think a few of us have some predictions ready to talk about there. We'll see where we're aligned and where we're different. And then we'll look ahead a little bit to the Chargers game. So we got a lot of good stuff going on here. And we'll probably also be talking a little bit about the Mariners as hopefully they win this game tonight. That's a side thing. So hopefully I will spend most of the time on the Seahawks. I know Jeff will not be thrilled to talk much about the Mariners. So with us as always, we've got Evan Hill. Welcome, Evan.
Thank you. Glad to be back.
Glad to have you back and hear that you had a pretty scary incident with your dog today. Hope that Frodo's doing a little bit better.
Yeah, he has like one of my shirts around him on his backside right now, so he's walking around the house. He looks like a grandma doggy nightgown style. It's pretty cute.
Yeah. He got a little bit of attacked in at the park, dude. So you got to take care of your kids, man.
Yeah, he's my son.
Yeah. Nathan Ernst, thank you for joining us. Glad to have you. And are you wearing a polo shirt?
Kind of.
You are, dude. You absolutely are wearing a polo shirt. Was that intentional?
No, I do have a bunch of polo shirts, but I don't wear them during games. I wear my jersey during the game. I will say I am actively taking recommendations on a new jersey. I've got a Sherm. I want to have a current player, current Seahawks. So if anyone can swing me right now, I'm leaning pretty hard towards Doug, but I could probably be swayed.
Yeah. I have some thoughts on that one. And then our intrepid co-host up there in Toronto, staying up late with us as always, is Jeff Simmons. How you doing, dude?
Good, man. I don't know if I'd get a Doug jersey.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I'm going to get a new one because I want like a current player, and I'm a little nervous about like how long is Doug going to be around? Am I going to be doing this again in a little bit?
Well, hold up. So they just restructured Doug's contract a little bit ago to fit. Was it Dwayne Brown in? I don't remember who it was. They shifted money around. I just bring that point up just because it guarantees his roster security even more so.
All right.
I don't think the Seahawks are gonna get rid of Doug Baldwin, but I could absolutely see Doug Baldwin deciding to ride off into the sunset earlier than maybe people are expecting.
Like retire or go to a different team?
Retire.
Wow.
I could see him retire.
Okay, because I was talking to a friend about this, and I love Sherm. I have a Sherm jersey. I totally saw this ending this way with him. Like, he was absolutely going to go play somewhere else. Like, there was going to be this inflection point where Sherm thinks he's the greatest, and for a lot of good reasons, and the team is going to get up against the cap situation, and he'd be somewhere else. And that it ended up being the Niners is not even, like, it's less surprising, right? Because, of course, Sherm wants to go and stick it to the Seahawks. Doug, though. Doug in a different jersey. Doug in, like, a Titans jersey.
Hey.
Like, that would kill me. I couldn't really do that. So it's good to hear that you're talking more like he may retire sooner than later than like he's going to try to like go off and go play somewhere else or something like that. Because that would suck from both a Doug perspective and also that the team, wouldn't be able to take care of him. So
I don't get that impression at all. Like, I mean, he really is. The person he reminds me of the most, or like I actually have tried to facilitate these two people getting to know each other, is Damian Lillard. And I don't know how much you guys follow. I know, Nathan, you follow basketball, but Damian Lillard's really well known in Portland for being pretty outspoken about wanting to stay in Portland and build a championship team there. He's one of the best players in the league, and the trendy thing to do is to go join up to a super team somewhere else and build it that way. And he's been pretty committed to staying put. I think Doug's the same way. I mean, he's obviously already won the championship here, but I think he's tied to Seattle. He wants to live here. I really see him invested in the franchise and in the city. So I'd be surprised if he pushes to get out. maybe something changes if the team all of a sudden is like 2-14 and Pete gets fired and some Jim Harbaugh gets hired. I don't know. Maybe something changes there, but that's kind of my read of it.
Interesting. All right. Well, that just sways me towards Doug even more. So.
Yeah, just a little bit on the numbers. So if they wanted to cut him in 2019, it's a $6.3 million dead money cap hit. So that's not going to happen. So he's for sure a Seahawk through 2019 minimum, barring retirement.
Right.
I promised Jeff Simmons that I was going to let him like run the show tonight because I'm too schizophrenic with my topics. But I really do need to know, like, from Jeff and from Evan, your top 2 jersey recommendations for Nathan.
Oh, Rashad Penny. No,
oh my God. No running back.
Need some company, dude. Yeah, it'd be so funny for Nathan to be wearing a running back jersey.
This is a really tough question because I think of like likability factor, and then I'm thinking of like long-term security on the Seahawks factor.
And also, like, I'm a little bit of a hipster, I guess. Like, I can't do Russ. I love Russ. I want to be a Seahawk forever. He's great. I just can't do, like, everybody's got it. Like, Russell Wilson, like, I don't know. It's a little too...
Oh, you know who's a good one?
Who's that?
Shaq Thompson. Shaquille Thompson.
I wanted a Seahawk jersey, though.
You want Shaquille Griffin?
Oh, Shaquille Griffin. Why did I think of Shaq? Who am I thinking of?
Shaq Thompson.
I think it's Husky over Husky.
If I'm going to get a Panthers jersey, well, I probably wouldn't get a Cam anymore.
Yeah.
You know who I
Shaq
get?
Griffin would be a good
Evan,
one.
do you know if I was going to get a Panthers jersey, do you know what Panther I would get?
Christian McCaffrey?
No, DJ Moore.
Oh, God.
Right, well, there's one. It's hard. This is hard. It's a really big decision.
No, I'm glad you brought up hipster because I think that's a huge part of it. And the reason I didn't cut Brian off because I actually think this is a great discussion. Back when I was writing for like a major website, I wanted to write an article about like what it goes into buying a jersey because most people will buy the quarterback or like the guy everyone wants. I think there has to be 2 factors. I think you want one that maybe no one else doesn't have, and 2 is longevity. I think you want one who's going to be around for a while. That's why I kind of swayed away from Doug, not for the fact that his contract might burn out, just because he's not going to be around as long as maybe a young guy. I think right now, probably the best Seahawks jersey, probably Shaquem Griffin. But that's a jersey that probably everyone's going to have.
Yeah, I would have no hesitation to get a Shaquem Griffin one. I'm thinking maybe choice B would be a Bobby Wagner. Still a very popular player, but still an underrated player, and I think he's got that longevity. So Bobby, Doug, Shaquem.
You are clearly missing the comedy factor in your choice.
I'm not getting a Michael Dixon.
Michael Dixon would be perfect on you.
No running backs and no punters. I don't want any part of like death to offenses. So no running backs, no punters.
Janikowski, blouse.
Ooh, I know which
with the shorts,
the nightgown.
I know which jersey you should get, Nathan. You love strong contributors at the tight end position, and we finally have one. His name is Will Dissly. Why don't you get his jersey?
If I'm gonna get a tight end jersey, I'm gonna get one that catches touchdowns, and so that would probably be Nick Vannett.
So I'm looking on the chat here at some of the recommendations coming in. Earl Thomas.
Oh,
no.
I bought that in 2010.
Chris Carson, which I think is a great choice for anyone but a anti-run analytic.
It's true.
Shaquille. That's a Shaquille, not a Shaquem.
Yeah.
Bobby Wagner. We heard that. Frank Clark. I mean, that's a pretty solid recommendation. I'm gonna shaking my head now. There's a CJ Procise. That is a very risky.
That's probably that breaks every rule.
We'll get into that. Yeah. So, I don't know about you guys, but I used to make my jersey choices based on trying to pick guys that I kind of like Jeff was saying that nobody else had. They were on the rise and young. And what that got me is my first jersey I ever bought was an Amon Green jersey, a Seahawks Amon Green jersey.
Not bad.
Yeah, I picked the right player. He didn't end up doing it for Seattle, so that kind of didn't work out. And then I picked a Corin Robinson jersey. And from there on, I was like, I don't know if I'm really going to keep going for the new young guys. But if I was, we'll talk about this a little bit later, but Rasheem Green, if you really want to be on the up and coming, that guy could be a really interesting one. I'm guessing no one's going to have him. And you'd have the bonus of having a Seahawks green jersey that is not a Jacob Green jersey. And there'd be a little bit of a conversation starter to have there. So, all right, Jeff, I've done my damage. Take us through this evening. What are we going to talk about?
All right. Firstly, I just want to thank everyone who joined us for the live show, even though I didn't come on until halftime. I had an emergency situation, but yeah, that was a fun thing, and it was fun to break down the game, especially the three of you who were there for the whole game. That was pretty cool, and we're still playing around with how we want to do that going forward. But again, that was a lot of fun for me for half of it. But yeah, the cool thing about preseason for me is you can watch the game and everyone takes away something completely different, or people looking for completely different things. Like some people get all worked up about wins and losses. For me, I couldn't care less about that. The two teams that have gone winless in NFL history in the modern era, 0-16, both went 4-0 in preseason. So I don't really care about the results. I care about a couple things. I care about how the starters look. To me, last week we talked about how did the offensive line look. And the big thing to me always is how do the rookies look. And to me, the Seahawks came out of that game, although there's a lot of issues with the opponent, but we'll save that for another day. I think they came out pretty good on those three categories. And to me, the biggest thing out of that game was the rookie class. And maybe the first pick didn't look great, but top to bottom, Seahawks we've talked about this so many times in the last year or two, how the drafting just has faded since 2012, really. And it was so refreshing to kind of see top to bottom a class that seems like the one that Pete Carroll and John had at the beginning of this program. And man, that was my big takeaway from the game. So we'll start with you, Brian. What did you make out of that game? I know we talked for 3 hours about this, but looking back, what really stood out?
Yeah, I think you hit it. The rookie class, especially, it was interesting. Like, there's an art to watching preseason football. There is, like, knowing what to pay attention to and what to ignore is hard. And I don't claim to have mastered it at all. I get excited about guys I shouldn't, and get disappointed in things that I maybe shouldn't as well. And a good example of that, I mean, you mentioned Rashad Penny, as one of the guys who maybe was a little disappointing that night. We were talking about that a lot. I'm still being very honest, and people on Twitter think I'm like anti-Rashad Penny. It's just not the case. I still haven't seen him. I haven't seen him do things that make me believe he's special yet, and worthy of the draft value the capital that they spent on him. But, there's some good points about the missed tackles that he created, in some of the opportunities he had. I think he led the team and missed or, created missed tackles or broken tackles in that game. So that, I think that's a reason to be hopefully optimistic that given more opportunities, he'll do better. But it's hard not to talk about Rasheem Green. I mean, I think Nathan did a great article on him, breaking down some of the video and his plays. And he's young and don't want to. The competition they were playing against in Indianapolis is a big caveat to all this. But he was winning not with just like blazing speed on the edge, but he was winning with his hands and keeping the offensive lineman's hands off of him. And that's a lot. I found that to be a lot more rare with rookie linemen than just pure physical get off and burst. So the fact that he's got some of those mechanics and he's powerful and he was productive against both the run and the pass, I thought that was really encouraging. So that was probably the biggest one for me. I'm psyched about Chris Carson. I really I really see big things for that guy this year. I think he is head and shoulders, I think, above. Even if Rashad Penny turns out to be a good player, I think Chris Carson is potentially a great player.
Evan, how about you?
There were really two players that stood out to me. Number one was Will Dissly. I think he was incredibly impressive in, he's not super flashy. He's not going to catch like 60-yard touchdown bombs, and he's probably not going to, put up 10 touchdowns a season like a Jimmy Graham type could, but he's going to contribute in the running game. And, I pulled up some snapshots from the game on Thursday where, Ifedi was really messing up, and Dissly really bailed him out a couple of times. And, I was just really impressed with his blocking abilities. So it was awesome to see him contribute in the run and passing game. The other player that flew super under the radar was Akeem King. I don't know if any of you noticed him. I know he was going against second and third stringers for a little bit, but I was really focused on his technique, and he was really tight in coverage. There were several throws in the end zone where he, had perfect coverage on, and maybe even had a chance at an interception if he had turned around his hips or turned around his eyes. And he might be a corner to watch, actually. That might be up and coming in that group. Outside of those two, Shaquem Griffin, I think he led the game in tackles, actually. Griffin was just kind of everywhere he needed to be, but there were a couple plays where I think he took some poor angles, and I think he'll rectify those issues. But I think to answer your question, Will Dissly, Akeem King, and Shaquem Griffin really stood out to me.
Yeah, that's another two. That's two rookies you mentioned. Brian mentioned Rasheem Green. None of us have talked about Michael Dixon. Jacob Martin looked pretty good. That's a pretty good group, top to bottom.
We were saving Dixon for Nathan because we was going to talk about him.
Yeah, well, we'll let Nathan jump in here.
I was not going to mention Dixon, although, in fairness, he did look good. You guys took all the easy ones. Quentin Jefferson was another guy who had a big game. He's a guy that's not quite as bad as like a Deion Jordan or someone like that, but he needs to stay healthy. But he looked really good out there. It's interesting that and this pass rush did have some issues, especially early on. But the Colts were also focusing on getting Luck into a rhythm, and he was getting the ball out quick and all that. But it's interesting that a lot of these defensive linemen kind of popped, like Jacob Martin, Quentin Jefferson, Rasheem Green, after pass rush being a big problem in camp. So it'll be interesting to see how that kind of shakes out and what that means when the regular season rolls around. Another guy, but in the opposite direction, Risu Diambo had some awful moments playing at left guard. Looked really bad. I know we're gonna, I think, talk about the roster a little bit later, and he's a guy that I'm starting to wonder if he makes this team.
I think that's totally fair, and another guy that we should mention that was playing really well from this rookie class was DeMarco Jones. I'm curious how big of a deal you guys think that injury is, assuming it's not a break. What we have, the latest we know is it's not a break, but Pete Carroll described it in the press conference as ankle sprain, a really legit high ankle sprain, and in Pete parlance that seems to indicate he's going to be out a while. So Evan, I know that was a big deal. What's your take there?
I'll be honest, I don't think people are freaking out enough. I'm freaking out. I viewed him as a big insurance policy if Dwayne Brown went down, or maybe if he even beat out Jermaine Ifedi for that right tackle spot. Ifedi was competing with Battle, and it looked to be DeMarco Jones at that right tackle spot, and both of those guys went down. It looks like Battle might end up being okay, it looks like, but we really don't have a time frame from Pete on DeMarco Jones yet. So I don't know if a really bad ankle sprain means 8 weeks away. I don't know if it means out for a season. I'm not really sure, but it's really concerning to me from a depth perspective, because if Dwayne Brown goes down, who's your left tackle? I'd actually I would feel sort of confident with DeMarco Jones being put at left tackle. I'd be optimistic about it, but with that injury, I guess the glass half full perspective is at least he's not counted out for the season yet, but the whole situation just sucks.
Yeah, and the one rookie none of us have talked about yet is Trey Flowers, and he had a pretty impactful part of the game. He started at cornerback. Byron Maxwell's is down right now. Dante Johnson's coming back from an injury. Trey Flowers, if he's not in position to start, he's in position to play a lot this year. So, Brian, what did you make of his first start? Did you see enough to get excited, or is there a lot that you're still worried about?
For me, there's a steady. The pot's not boiling yet on Trey Flowers for me. Like it's a roll. It's warming up. I think he's done a nice job of staying on top of the receivers so far. From what I've seen in camp, to me, he is not a natural. Like I'm hearing a lot of things from Ken Norton Jr. And Pete being very effusive in their praise of him, which is great. They're clearly giving him opportunity high up in the depth chart. I think that's a good indication. It's just not as obvious to me yet. So that's my view. Like I think he's a guy that I'm like excited that it looks like, unlike a Mike Tyson or an Eric Pinkins that they took as safeties that they converted to cornerbacks, and it just clearly it just wasn't working. Flowers looks like it could work. So that's, I think, a really encouraging sign. That's like a huge step. There's another step beyond that I feel like a lot of people are talking about him as, our next great corner, and he's going to be a starter right away. I think we're in trouble if he's starting right away this season. I think, there's reason that they're going to need a Byron Maxwell, or the guy that I'm really hoping plays this weekend and shows something is Dante Johnson, the guy who started all last year for the 49ers, and we have not yet seen play for the Seahawks.
And Johnson got snaps at right cornerback this week in practice. I agree. I'd like to see him. There were rumors about Cromartie having a workout with Seattle last week. He told Josina Anderson that it went really well, but since then it hasn't been much. So it seems like Flowers, Maxwell, Johnson, those are the guys you're looking at in the right cornerback battle. Nico Thorpe's still down. Akeem King did look good, but I don't see him getting into that mix quite yet. So, yeah, Flowers is a guy you got to watch real closely, and we'll get into the Chargers game a little bit later. But sticking this Colts game, Nathan, you dug into the film. I want to know your thoughts on the offensive line. They didn't play. The starting offensive line didn't play very much, but are you encouraged at all, or did you see anything that really jumped out to you, or was it just them overmauling or overmatched against pretty much a terrible defense?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I saw Odiombo look really bad. He was one of the few guys I really zoomed in on. Mm-hmm. And then you had Roos had a couple bad moments, but it wasn't impressive. I mean, Jones played okay, Fant played okay, but this is a team that's going to have one of the worst defenses in the league, and they didn't show off in any way. So I think overall, some bad moments, some bad plays, but just kind of worrisome that they weren't able to put something better together against that team.
And what about you, Evan? You're Mike Solari's biggest fan in Seattle, so.
I mean, I'm sick of the negativity, man. Okay. So all these people, when we start talking about positive things with the Seahawks during preseason games, people are like, it's preseason and they're playing the Colts. Well, would you have rather them play poorly? Would you have rather them not score a touchdown on the first drive? Would you have rather them look like a Tom Cable offensive line? Would you rather have them not give Russell Wilson a tarmac in pass protection? What do you want? The offensive line looked great. They looked in sync. That's what you want. So, I don't know. I'm optimistic about it.
Yeah, I think great is a pretty big stretch. I don't know that they looked great at any real point. The starters looked okay. The starters didn't look bad. They didn't look overwhelmed. They were able to get some stuff going. Pass protection wise, Carson looked good. So in terms of the starters, like there's no complaints there. But if you're starting to look beyond that and you're looking at the depth, then it got pretty shaky.
Oh no, totally. And I want to clarify that. I completely agree with you.
Yeah.
I think the depth thing is an issue, like a big issue, especially with the injuries that came out of that game. But I think the starters looked really good. I really do.
It was cool to see the screenshots of those pockets. When was the last time you saw them?
Yeah, Evan was tweeting some of those out, and I think, I will agree with Nathan on two parts. One, like I did not think the backup line looked very good. Number 2 or number 3, I thought they looked pretty poor. I thought that for me was one of the takeaways is that the depth on the offensive line looks pretty scary to me, especially with Jones being out. I think Jones is a guy that was really rocketing up the charts. I think that's a huge injury. And we'll talk about when we get into the 53-man roster piece. I think it's going to be pivotal to how they form their roster. I got my fingers crossed that they're going to figure out a way to bring him back this year, but there's a chance that they won't. But the starting line, yeah, I would be hard-pressed to say that line didn't look significantly better than, any time last year during the regular season, for whatever that's worth. And there was some encouraging signs there. It was one series. So, okay to say they did their jobs. There's no massive breakdowns, and let's see more of that consistently.
The guy generating a lot of buzz out of the Seahawks organization. John Clayton's been talking about him all week on radio. Is DJ Fluker. Sweezy was a guy that we all thought maybe could get into this competition. He's having trouble practicing right now. He's banged up. Obviously one series you're not going to see much of Fluker, but it was kind of cool seeing him get out to the second level and some of those blocks. And the big thing with him is going to be pass protection, but he looked interesting. He's a player that's going to be probably a lightning rod all year because he's probably going to whiff on pass pro, and you're going to see him make some mauling blocks in the run game. But it was kind of cool seeing him just get out there and create some of those holes for Carson. And then there was that 4th and 1. He ran right behind him. So that was pretty encouraging to me because we all know Dwayne Brown's probably going to hold up well. Britt will probably hold up well. We're all crossing our fingers on a Fetty, especially now that Jones and Battle are down. But that Fluker stood out to me, even though it was just one series.
What about Fant? I mean, there's one play that stood out in my mind on Fant. I'm curious, Nathan, or Evan, if you guys looked more at it afterwards. But there was a play where he was playing left tackle, and the guy beat him off the snap and was coming around the edge, had a step on him, and Fant was able to. His arms are so long, and he was able to, just extend his arms, recover, and basically harmlessly push the guy around the pocket, and he wasn't able to make a play. That was impressive to me because he was beaten on one hand and was able to recover just based on natural physical ability, length of his arms, and those pieces that you can't really coach necessarily. I didn't see as much other things, and in fact, I think I saw at least one other play where he didn't look so good. But I'm curious if you guys saw more of him or what you thought about his play.
Yeah, I don't know if I saw that play exactly, but there was at least one play where I had a similar thought where it was just like, boy, he's long as hell, and that counts for a lot, right? Overall, I didn't think that Fant really stood out too much one way or the other, but he did look solid. I mean, he's coming back from that injury, so tackle depth is always nice, but to me, he didn't really jump out one way or the other. I should say I spent a lot more time. The offensive line is not one of the things I actually really dug into a whole lot this time around. I looked at Reese. I went and watched him a little bit, a couple other guys, but overall, spent more time looking at different parts of the team.
Did you guys hear the comment Chris Carson made in the post-game show? I can't remember who was interviewing him, but someone asked him about what it was like to run behind this line, and is it different? And he said, I don't want to make too much out of it, but he said that it was nice running behind. They talked about the Solari scheme, that there were multiple holes to choose from. And it wasn't, I don't think the impression I got was not that he was saying, hey, the guys are blocking and creating more holes, but that there was more choice for the running back in terms of where they were to go, as opposed to maybe with Cable, there was a lot more pressing, and waiting for the specific gap that was designed to be there, to trust and to go with it. I'm curious if we're going to see a little bit of difference there in terms of how the running backs are playing behind the line, behind the scheme.
I mean, that's interesting because in zone blocking, you have options, right? You can either bounce it, you can hit it where you're supposed to hit it, or you can cut it back in. So it's weird that who knows what Cable was coaching these guys, right? Like, I mean, so maybe Cable was really particular about what you did and didn't want you taking some of those options. But like, I don't feel like that should be the case. That in zone blocking, you should have those opportunities, and so it's probably just a question about emphasis that Cable put on these guys.
And one of the knocks on Cable from players who had played for him and guys who had dug into film is that it was really easy for the defense to know what they were doing schematically. And I wonder if that impacted just how the amount of holes that were on the field, because they could read the play based on the formation. Almost, I remember Warren Sapp was going when him and Cable were together in Oakland. That was a big issue for them because he said in practice they knew what they were doing every single time, and that was all scheme related.
This is when Evan takes a moment and just says thanks, gives thanks for the lack of Tom Cable.
It's just amazing. It's just amazing. Tom Cable is not here to ruin our lives anymore. And every day I celebrate that fact. Every day I toast to that fact. I'm ecstatic.
Do you guys see Chris Warren and Marshawn in that last game, though? They looked pretty good running the ball.
I believe the 60-yard touchdown was a holding penalty, if I'm not mistaken. So that's probably a Cable fundamental technique issue that needs to be addressed there.
I mean, didn't we see these guys come out and look better in the preseason like every year? Like, I know there was a year that we got excited for George Fant, and last year it was like, are they finally going to have a decent offensive line, right? Like, I mean, this is a Tom Cable special too, that they come out and they look good in the preseason, and then when teams actually start to game plan for you, maybe things get a little different.
Yes and no. The big thing watching the first preseason game every year is they look disastrous on the offensive line. Like, there was a couple of years ago against Denver, they looked as bad as I've ever seen an offensive line look. And every year we're just hoping for like a semblance of functionality. And even just when talking about this 53-man thing, I looked at last year's opening day line. You had Reese Odiombo at left tackle, Luke Jokel at left guard, Afedi at right tackle, Ode Abushi at right guard. That is a bad group. That's 4 backups probably. So at least this year they've upgraded to potentially 2 to 3 actual NFL starters. So I guess that's pretty good progress.
Yeah. I was kind of curious. I don't know if you guys had a chance to look at the article I wrote comparing the position groups from this year to last year and like who actually got snaps. But yeah, I mean, it reminds me of that, Jeff, when I was looking at the offensive line. Luke Jokel, I mean, guy's not in the league.
How is that though? Like, I know he's bad and all, but like Jamarcus Webb's in the league. How is Jokel not in the league?
I have a take on Luke Jokel. I think we should re-sign him for depth purposes. At minimum. At that minimum. I mean, come on. It's a camp body. What, Brian? You look so...
I'm so bothered by that. I mean, we paid him for 3 years worth of service. He should come back and play for free, if anything.
He should pay us probably for making us watch him.
No, they didn't pay him 3 years. He got a 1 year deal, right? 1 year.
No, he's saying like we paid him 3 years worth.
$7 million or seven and a half or whatever.
Yeah.
I mean, he was like, That was like playing Ferrari prices for, a Yugo. I mean, it was really unfortunate. I don't know. I'm not interested in bringing a veteran, low upside guy that's going to block any potential of improvement and has injury issues, and not interested. Not interested. I'm interested in. I'm curious if they choose to keep even Fluker and Sweezy. Do you guys wonder if there's a chance they're going to pick one veteran at the guard spot, and whoever starts gets it, and whoever doesn't is shown the door?
Brian, stop it.
I'm wondering.
Stop it. Cut?
Yeah.
They both look so. Okay, hold up. Sweezy, people.
Well, finish that sentence. They both look what? Sweezy hasn't stepped on the field, dude.
I know. And that's why I quickly backtracked in my head because I knew I would get crucified for that one. No, but I think I like what we have at right guard. DJ Fluker is cheap as hell. Sweezy is cheap as hell. They're not taking it up any major salary cap space or anything like that. If one goes down, it's just an insurance policy. I really like who did the cut-ups of Sweezy with the Bucks? Was it somebody from the Athletic? Was it Sam Gold or Ben Baldwin? I don't remember who did it.
Was it Coleman?
Maybe?
I think it was Sam Gold.
Maybe it was Sam Gold.
I think Sam did too, yeah.
And he looked so good in pass pro. He was like, this guy's a new player post Tom Cable. Interesting how that works, by the way. So it's like, based off of, he had really an injury plagued time with the Bucks. So I think if he can be healthy, I think he will probably be the starter at right guard.
Wow, that's a bold take.
I mean, I'll be honest, if he's healthy, I'd be shocked if Sweezy isn't the starter at right guard.
Really?
Yeah.
You spent all offseason going off about how great DJ Fluker is. And the dude that's practiced for like half a practice is suddenly going to take Fluker's job.
Did you see Samuel Gold's breakdown of J.R. Sweezy in Tampa? Oh my gosh.
It looked good. It looked good.
Impressive.
Yeah.
Admit it, Nathan. You're optimistic about him.
No, I agree. I think he probably should take DJ Fluker's job if he's healthy. All right. So, because again, cold water. So, first preseason game, 2017, Seahawks 48, Chargers 17. They didn't run too well. Davis had 8 carries, 4.1 yards per carry. The rest of the backs didn't do too well. But then next week, they beat the Vikings. Vikings, a very good defense. Alex Collins rushed for 5.8 yards per carry. Mike Davis rushed for 6.2 yards per carry. Chris Carson, 4.5 yards a carry. Against the Chiefs the next week, J.D. McKissick, 7 carries for 6.5 yards. Chris Carson, 8 carries for 5.8 yards a carry. And Eddie Lacy, 4 carries, 5.3 yards per carry.
Yeah, the Seahawks were 4th in the NFL in rushing last year in the preseason.
This is what they do. I feel like this is a common thing. So,
but they did in 2015. Like they were one of the worst offenses in preseason, and then were one of the
worst offenses for about 8 weeks of the season too.
Yeah, exactly. But then became one of the best.
Yeah,
Drew Nowak, the Drew Nowak era.
Yeah,
Brian, I got to attack you on this one. Can you explain your logic, your reasoning for that? Why is, assuming there's no health issues, why would Fluker or Sweezy be cut? Are you not seeing the potential? Are you not seeing, I don't know. What are you saying?
Yeah, I'm raising the question because they've done some really unexpected things. So this is me trying to anticipate them. This is not me saying,
this is not you saying this is what they should do.
Yeah.
Okay.
They treat veterans on this roster in a really odd way. We've seen this where they don't tend to really keep a lot of veterans around. They prefer to keep young players, and if there's close to even, they'll keep the younger player in a lot of those situations because they see that person is kind of growing and developing past where the veteran is. And so if it meant, for example, that they had to put someone, on the street in order to keep a veteran that was going to be a backup, there's a chance in my mind that they would say, you know what, we'd rather keep the young player around and we're going to let the veteran go. And especially, Fluker and Sweezy both have different injury questions, but if that's another factor, if they can't rely on this person to actually be available as well, that might play a role. I don't think it's likely, and I hope they're both around. But there are some rumors that I don't know how credible they are, that they're also looking at least trying out Richie Incognito, and Richie Incognito liked and retweeted a tweet from someone on Twitter about hoping that he was going to join the Seahawks. So anyway, we'll see. I have similar questions about other veterans on the roster in other places that are probably more likely to be at risk. But yeah, I brought that one up.
Okay, so that's a good way to transition into probably our best segment of tonight. Brian, I don't know if you guys saw this, but Brian posted an article going through the entire roster, breaking the team down from who's a lock to make it, who's a bubble to make it, who's a long shot, who needs to step up. He went all the way 1 to 90, and the four of us talked throughout the week, and we kind of put together, I don't know if we all wrote 1 to 53 down, but we kind of went through we're going to kind of go through the decisions that the Seahawks are going to have to make, and the right guard one's a good way to start. We all had our thoughts on that, and what Brian was saying before is, in the Green Bay model that John Schneider learned scouting from, the way they look at backups is they don't place a high emphasis on a veteran backup. The way they look at it is, would you rather have 1 year of a guy or 3 to 4 years of a younger player? And historically, that's what Ted Thompson did. John Schneider has done that here, where if they have a choice in a backup role, and it happened with Jari Evans, unfortunately, probably their biggest mistake they've made here, they typically choose the younger guy because they can get more service time out of them. That's sort of the baseball terminology.
A great example.
Yeah. And that's the way they've always viewed it, because they always want to remain, especially now where they're kind of in a transition. We might see that a lot. So as we go through this roster now, that's something to think about. And their goal, and John's mentioned this so many times, is to stay one of the younger teams in the league. Green Bay was always like that with Ted Thompson. And that's an area where you can keep young, and Seattle's kind of gone that way in so many occasions. The right tackle a couple years ago when Britt was coming out. Who was that guy? He's the head of the Players Union now.
Oh,
Eric
Winston.
Eric Winston. He was a guy that probably should have made the team. They kept a younger guy who probably didn't turn out to be any good over him. Britt ended up playing right tackle all year. He wasn't very good at it, if we're being honest. Then there's been a couple examples of that. And when we get to wide receiver, and we're going to keep bringing this up. So I think we talked about right guard there, so we'll move to a different position. I think the most interesting position, if we're going to talk the 53, and I don't know if we want to go quarterback all the way down. Okay, we'll start with quarterback. We don't need to do much on that, right? I think it's pretty obvious.
Actually, I'm here to tell you right now, our backup quarterback is not on the roster.
Okay, well, I'm wrong.
Wait. All right, yeah. Who is it then?
And I don't know who it is, but Austin Davis looked like hot garbage.
That looked fine. I don't know why everyone thinks this is crazy. Like, what did he do? Show me the play where he looked so awful.
The touchdown throw to Keenan Reynolds.
That was Austin Davis.
No, that's what I'm talking about.
No, I'm saying Magoo. Magoo looked okay.
Oh, I'm talking. We got mixed up. Miscommunication. I was talking about Austin Davis.
Yeah, I know. I'm just saying, if they're Magoo looked okay, they don't need to go off the roster for that.
I guess I'm not sold on him yet.
Okay. I don't know who's out there. I mean, maybe they end up doing something and waiting for a cut down or something like that. Teddy Bridgewater?
Yeah, actually. He might. Yeah, we'll see what ends up with his situation.
What about the Jets?
What about the Jets?
I gotta look it up. Yeah, so
that's Bridgewater, right?
They got Teddy Bridgewater, and they got Josh McCown's not going to get cut, right?
No, he's the perfect backup quarterback.
Right. Yeah, I haven't even looked at backups, but
I mean, somebody's going to pay Teddy, though. Like, somebody with a bigger quarterback need than Seattle is going to be willing to go after him a little bit.
They might trade
him.
They should trade him.
Yeah.
RG3.
That sounds crazy, but like, I like it. Seriously.
He's looked good. So, all right, maybe I'm with you. Maybe that will be some of the sun on the roster.
I don't think Austin Davis or Magoo have done enough either to win the backup job.
Well, I mean, here's some fuel to the fire. Reports that the Seahawks brought in Josh Johnson for a look. I mean,
when was the last time that dude was in the league?
Yeah, that's not a good sign in that any of us want Josh Johnson on the roster, but it is an indication that there's, some eyes open about what they've got at the backup quarterback position and wanting to see what else might be out there. So it's possible.
According to Pro Football Reference, and this gets Stacy when players like aren't regularly on a team, but Josh Johnson hasn't been in the league since 2014. That's insane.
Yeah. Well, look, I mean, if they're going to make a move at quarterback, I don't know about you guys, but I'd want them to make a trade for a quarterback sooner rather than later, maybe after the second game. If neither backup looks capable of being a true backup this year, then, that would be maybe the time to do it. I will say, though, I mean, if I'm not mistaken, the Seahawks went some years with Josh Portis as their only backup. Is that right? Am I right about that?
No, I think they always had Tavares.
They always have Tavares those times?
I think Boykin was the switch out of Tavares.
Boykin. Yeah, Boykin was the guy that guy was not a viable quarterback.
No, we would have been having the same discussion that 2 years ago.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. All right, so maybe I was wrong about this being obvious. Okay, we're moving on. Okay. This is the next spot, and I guess on Brian's list would be running back. This becomes a very interesting one because, we'll start with what Brian did. Locks on this team, Carson, Penny. We don't need to spend any time on them. We've talked about Penny enough. We all know our thoughts on him. The next three guys, and I don't know how many guys did this exercise, but I really struggled on what to do with CJ Procise because you keep hearing these stories about how he's turned it around, the classic training camp story. And once again, he has this flaring injury before the game and he doesn't play and now he can't practice. I cut him in my 53 and I didn't expect to do that. I thought it'd be nuts to cut him, but when I went through the whole 25 guys on offense, I kept Davis over him. I kept McKissick and I kept Trey Madden at fullback. Can you guys see a situation where they keep 5 running backs and a fullback? Because they cut Fowler off the roster. Khalid Hill is hurt. So it looks like Trey Madden, if there's a fullback, is going to be the fullback.
So they did do that to start last year. They carried 6 guys, and one of them was a fullback. So it's not crazy. Like, they could do the exact same thing they did last year, I think, except you have Penny instead of Lacey. Well, and I guess McKissick instead of Rawls. I don't know. Or Davis instead of Rawls, I think. So, but you can keep 6 guys if they want. And, I mean, we'll kind of get into this as we go through this, but, like, there are roster spots. There's wiggle room on this team. So, like, I had 5. I had Penny, Carson, Madden. I think those are pretty solidly in. And then I think it's McKissick and Procise after that. But, like, there are other worse players that I've had to consider keeping going through this than Mike Davis. So,
all right, just to jump in there for a second, Nathan, are you counting McKissick as a running back last year? Is that how you get to 6?
So last year was Carson, Lacey, Rawls,
Procise,
Mike Davis.
Procise.
No, Davis did not make it.
McKissick made the team.
Oh, you're right.
So
And they kept Trey Madden and who else?
I think they only kept 5. That's what I was wondering. They did keep McKissick, but they counted him essentially as a receiver.
They did keep McKissick, and I counted him as a running back. You're right.
Okay.
So yeah. So and I mean I get it. Like McKissick, he's a weapon or whatever, but like he's a running back. Like
he is for sure this year a running back.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's an interesting point. So we got Davis and we have Procise. let's go around here. Do you keep all three? Do you keep two of them? And if which two? Or I don't think they're going to keep one of them. It's either keep all three or keep two. All right, we'll start with you, Evan.
So the three were which players? Sorry, you cut out.
Davis, and Procise.
I think you keep two, and CJ Procise's presence fully depends on if he's healthy or not. This is a very simple question to me with CJ Procise. We all remember the awakening with C Mike a couple years ago, where all the coaches were hyping him up, and they're like, "This is a new guy. He's going to be so good this year." Blah blah blah. This is very simple with CJ Procise. Is he healthy or is he not healthy? Very simple. Best ability is availability. Very simple. To me.
What does that have to mean in terms of availability in this case? Like, he has to play the rest of the games. If he misses one game, plays two of the last three, what's your line?
I need to see him in the next 3 preseason games. Every single one.
So you're cutting CJ Procise.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not disputing that he's talented. I think he's super talented, but it's just so frustrating when he, incurs the most minor injuries that take him out for weeks on end. And, I'm not blaming him because I don't think he can control this to an extent, but I think it just is what it is, unfortunately.
Okay. How about you, Brian?
Actually, I think I'm mostly aligned with Evan there. I mean, first of all, I only keep two for sure. I probably have a little bit lighter and easier of a line for Procise to meet, a threshold for him to meet. I really do think he needs to play this week. I think that matters. I think if he can play 2 out of the last 3 games, I guess I see Mike Davis as a guy. I like Mike Davis. I enjoy watching him. He was a street free agent last year that nobody was interested in. He was a street free agent the year before that nobody was interested in. I think you can cut him and put him on your practice squad, or even if he's not eligible, I think you can get someone like him. So I don't feel this need to carve out a roster spot for Mike Davis. I don't think Mike Davis is going to become the next Alex Collins. If CJ Procise, is able to stay healthy, he could very well be Alex Collins or more if he's able to play. So I'm fine keeping around a player that shows enough. He has to actually play, and having him as a backup. I have no problems with that.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's move on now, and we'll let Nathan start on the next one. I think the most interesting debate going through this exercise on offense was the wide receiver group. Historically, they've capped mostly between 5 and 6. There was 5 last year. And as Brian pointed out in his article, the 4th and 5th receiver were basically non-factors all year. It was Darbo and
McAvoy.
Favorite, yeah. So the receiver group that we've debated a ton going into camp and early in camp, it's got some interesting names. Guys have emerged a little bit. Guys have fallen back. So, Nathan, you're more of a believer in the pass game. You're basically the anti-Brian Schottenheimer. How many receivers do you think they should keep, and which guys?
So I had 6, and it was really – there's a couple things here. So, like you said, they kept 5 the last 2 years. Shotty's going to run a lot of 2 wide set. We already saw that, right? A lot of I-form and stuff. And he's also going to involve the tight ends and running backs more. So they really don't need to keep more than 5, even though I think 5 is cutting it pretty thin. But there's just, again, there's roster spots where you get down to the last, 3-4 spots, and you're just like, who am I giving this to? And so I went with David Moore for that 6th spot. My list is Doug, Tyler. I've got Jaron Brown. And then I went Stringfellow and Brandon Marshall. Marshall's another guy that very easily could not make this team. He has not played yet in a preseason game, I don't think. Did he play?
He did.
He did play. Okay, well, he didn't do anything.
No.
Now he's attached at the hip to Russ, and so I'm kind of thinking that he makes it, but he's shown less than Terrell Owens showed, and Terrell Owens got cut, right? Different team, and then I just went with talent on David Moore, because this team needs talent.
What about you, Evan? What's the magic number receiver, and who are the guys?
I'm tempted to go 6 with Doug Baldwin's uncertainty with that injury. I know there's a lot of optimism about week 1. I'm still a little nervous about that, though. But I'm leaning 5. So Doug Baldwin's a lock. Tyler Lockett's a lock. Jaron Brown, whatever his name is a lock. I think Brandon Marshall is an absolute lock. He's been running with the ones all training camp. Why would he be running with the ones if he wasn't a lock in my mind? And then the 5th receiver for me is David Moore. We haven't seen anything from Darbo, and he's really the controversial pick to cut, but we just haven't seen anything from him. And the only reason you'd be keeping him, to win that 5th receiver spot is his draft value where you selected him. I think it was the 3rd round. I'm not about that anymore. We need players who can contribute. David Moore had a really sweet catch along the sidelines, and I think he has a lot of potential. So those are my 5 receivers.
Okay, Brian, you brought up an interesting point. We were talking on Twitter a little yesterday also about how the bottom of their roster receivers typically go to special teams players.
Mm-hmm.
And Marcus Johnson's a guy you've kind of made the case for in one area, and he's a guy that none of us have mentioned yet. I don't know how much you've seen from him in camp. He buzzed a lot early in camp, didn't show up at all in the game. I know it's only been one game. Darbo, you were kind of ahead of the curve on last year as a guy who pretty much contributed nothing. Really, he shouldn't have made the team last year.
Yeah.
And I don't see how he makes the team this year based on everything we're hearing, everything you're seeing. So there's also Stringfellow guy Nathan mentioned, Keenan Reynolds, who you were high on early in camp. Are we missing anyone? Who do you think are those 5 guys?
No, I mean, I think I've got Johnson ahead of Moore. Not because I think he's a better receiver than Moore, but because 2 reasons. One, I think he's been a proven special teams player in the league for Philadelphia. And I don't know if you guys heard him interviewed and the conversations with Howie Roseman about it, but like Howie Roseman was like, dude, we just traded you for a Pro Bowler. They wanted you like for a Pro Bowler and Michael Bennett in return. And the Seahawks, Schneider literally went after Marcus Johnson for some reason. And the Eagles saw him as a rising young player in their system. And he's played really well in camp. I mean, he's done fine. I don't think he's top notch, but I think he's a very legitimate contender for a roster spot. I have him keeping 6, so it ends up being both Moore and Johnson. And to me, it's Stringfellow that's kind of the question mark. Reynolds to me has faded quite a bit, so I'm not sure he's going to really be in competition, but that could change over the next few days.
Yeah, that's fair. I also had 6. One of my bigger debates, and if maybe we can mock this out towards the end of the preseason when we go through that final 53, is one of the things when you're making a team is you have all the position coaches in the room, and they're all fighting for that extra guy. So in this situation, it could be the running back coach fighting with the receiver coach to see who gets that extra body. And when I did that in my head, I ended up going David Moore and Marcus Johnson over the running back. And I don't know if that fits in what Schottenheimer does in the scheme, but I just thought there was too much talent to let go. And you'd mentioned 5 running backs was enough for me, including the fullback. And I'm with Evan. I think Brandon Marshall has moved from a guy I didn't think had a chance to make the team coming into the preseason. He just seemed like a camp body, a guy that they've like the TO is a great example. And the way the coaches talk about him, and maybe I'm buying into too much crap, but it seems like these guys love him. And if you follow him on Instagram at all or any of that, he's really fit in nicely with Russ, and he's really fit in nicely with the team. And today, I know Schottenheimer had an interview with Bob Condotta, and he was raving about Marshall and kind of the stuff he's teaching the Trey Flowers and the stuff he's teaching the younger receivers. So I moved him into the lock group. I might be completely wrong about that one, but that's how I view it. So I guess to me, tight end is the next position. That's a lot like quarterback. It's pretty simple. The one question, who, if he's not ready to play, is that a PUP situation, Brian, or do you think that?
Well,
He
he is,
start on
I
pup,
think
right?
he eligible, isn't he?
Yeah.
I think so. Because I don't.
No, he's not.
He's not.
You have to start training camp on pup.
Okay, so he's
And
not a
he
PUP.
did not. I couldn't remember that.
Okay, that's a good question.
Yeah, I don't think he's practiced yet. I just don't know if he started. I thought he started on pup, but I might be wrong.
Yes. To me,
he's on the NFI list.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
So other than that kind of roster designation, it seems pretty obvious what's happening there. Disley and Vanette are going to play the majority of snaps in preseason. Those guys look like pretty decent players. And if Dixon isn't ready to start the season, it's probably Tyrone Swoops, who's the third tight end, who made a couple nice blocks in the game. And then other than that, there's not much there. It's a bunch of camp bodies. You probably have no shot at making any 90-man roster. So I don't want to spend too much time on that.
Agreed.
The next question is the interesting one. And we had the Sweezy debate before. I think the 5 guys on the offensive line that we've seen as the starting pretty much guys in camp, they're all locks, right? Even though all of us would probably like to find a spot for a Fetty on another team, I assume the top 5 guys are all locks. So the question now is, who are the backups? Is it 9 guys? Is it 10 guys? And if so, I have no idea because there's so many different ways you can go about this, especially with the DeMarco Jones factor. How do you structure this backup group? There's so many.
I got to break in for a second.
Yeah.
Dota just broke some news, and maybe you guys already knew this, that Rashad Penny suffered a hand injury that includes a broken finger.
Oh, that was today?
It just came out.
Wow.
Okay, so I want to see if I can read this first.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Interesting. Doesn't necessarily, broken fingers are not big deals for running backs.
Still got to catch the ball, though.
But it sounds like he's going to miss some time. Yeah.
That's a bummer.
Well, that changes a lot.
Yeah.
It seems like.
I mean, isn't that something where he could be ready for week 2?
No, he should be ready for week 1 on that injury.
So I'm not worried about it like impacting the regular season.
No, probably not. I mean, it depends on if it's which hand it is. He's got to be able to secure the football, right?
Yeah.
That's a big deal. So, yeah, it depends on the severity of the hand injury, but it's one to watch, and that certainly would have an impact on guys like Procise and Davis. So.
Well, Bob, thank you for ruining our debate.
Just wanted to add a little bit in there that everybody gets injured, folks.
Yeah, the broken finger's a little better than if you had a broken hand. So catching the ball, as Nathan said, is probably the biggest concern there.
Yeah.
Well, in the same way that he phrased it, Condotta says suffered a hand injury that includes a broken finger. So there might be more to it than just a broken finger.
I'll just have to go see Mike. Only in one hand. Can't switch. Okay, offensive line though. So I think there's 6 just like clear answers. The starting 5 that we saw, and then Fant. I think Fant's in. I don't know if there's an argument over that, but I would consider him a lock. I mean, and then for me, I went 10, and my other ones were Battle, Roos. What was the Battle's okay, right? He just had a
he's fine.
Yeah,
he got his brain knee. He should be back.
Yeah. So Battle, Roos.
Oh, we lost him.
Beaver's out, Henry out, Hunt out, Phillips out, and then Sweezy. But again, this is a health thing, right? Like, is DeMarco Jones going to end up on IR? Do they keep somebody extra? Do they try to, like, if he is going to be out for a long period of time, do they try to, like, waive him and get him onto their IR right now? And if anything like that happens, then, you can see Sweezy jumping in and taking that spot. Also, like I said, Odiombo looked awful. So he could just outright lose his job to Sweezy if Sweezy can get back, but Sweezy has to get back out on the field, otherwise they just can't keep him, right? So that's where I ended up on about 10 guys.
Did you have Jones in there? I couldn't remember.
Yeah, I do. It's a big wild card with what they end up deciding to do with him, whether they want to try to carry him through or what.
I would try and carry him, honestly, if he can come back midway through the season. But I absolutely agree with you. I'm not sure Reese makes this roster at all.
The thing that helps him is like it's Roos is a guard, and then not a lot of other guards on the team. So again, maybe Sweezy gets healthy, and then you have Sweezy, and then you're totally fine, and then you can just cut Odiombo. But like, if Sweezy can't get right, then you're running with 3 guards plus some flexibility with the Fetty and stuff. So
yeah, Skylar Phillips is a guy to at least watch there. He had a pretty bad preseason game, but I have liked what I've seen in practice from him. He's a young guard and has actually swung to tackle at times. The question for me and why I think Odiombo is in trouble is backup center. I don't know that they want Ethan Posick to be their backup center because that means that in a game they're going to have to switch out and shift 2 players. Posick would have to move over from guard to center, and then they'll bring in another player to play guard. So that's why guys like Joey Hunt end up sticking around. And at least that's a specific role where Odiombo is just, he's just depth. So I do think Odiombo is really at risk.
They did not keep a backup center starting 2017 last year. So they did go that way last year. Obviously they ended up bringing Hunt back and he's involved again, but they did just go with Britt last year.
Mm-hmm.
I thought I had Reese Odiombo not making the team as some surprise of this exercise, and apparently all of you did that. So that ruins all the fun for me. I had Roos beating him out. Roos can play left guard in a pinch. If you have Roos and Sweezy as your backup guards, that's serviceable. It's not ideal, but you got Fan as the backup tackle. I also had Battle, mostly because DeMarco Jones can't play right now. And yeah, I think that's the biggest battle right now. Well, the backup guard situation. I think Fan is your backup left tackle. Do you carry Isaiah Battle? Do you need a backup right tackle, or can Fant go both ways?
He's been practicing both ways, right?
Yeah.
Not yet, but I think they're working him towards that. I think they definitely have said that they want him to get to the right tackle side as well. Yeah, to me, the real question is Jones and what they do there. Because if they decide to carry him, it's clear he's not going to be ready for week 1. It seems like it would be a huge shock if that. I'm thinking that earliest would be maybe mid-season or 6 games in, and if they believe he can come back, then great. But they have to carry him on the week 1 roster in order to put him on the type of IR that allows them to bring him back later in the season. If they put him on the IR now, he's out for the year and he can't come back no matter what. So if they do that, they're basically taking a big gamble because it's a rookie. He's not going to get to practice or be part of the development process, and then he might not even be able to make it back. So I have this concern that they're just going to put him on IR and say, call it a redshirt year, and
So I've got a question. I've never gotten a clear understanding of this. Can you put a player directly onto IR in training camp?
You can, but it's a specific that is not the IR that is eligible to return during the season.
Okay, so when they've done the thing where they've waived a player and then they revert back to the team's IR, they're then eligible to come off that at some point later in the year? Is that how that works?
Not. My understanding is that is, if it's done in preseason, that's not the case. That they actually have to be on the week 1 roster or on the regular season roster before that.
So why do they waive players and then revert them back to their IR? What is that whole process? I don't understand it.
So it's like stashing people around, like the cornerback they got from Detroit a few years ago that never ended up playing.
Cisse.
Yeah, Cisse. Like they like him, they wanted him around. So they're going to pay him.
When do you have to waive versus when can you put them directly on the IR?
Yeah, that's a good question. Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah, I don't know. I
believe you can waive someone with an injury designation, and it gives the league. I think if it's not a veteran with I think it has to be someone like with a certain amount of service time.
Gotcha.
And if you waive them with an injury designation, the rest of the league gets a shot to claim them. If they go unclaimed, they revert directly to your team's injury reserve that cannot come out. They have to be there for the rest of the year.
So it's a service time, though.
I don't believe DeMarco Jones, if they waived him, they would not waive him. They would stash him right on the IR.
Yeah.
So waiving clears a roster spot. That's the difference. Putting them on IR, they go directly on IR. Waive them gives them an opportunity to get picked up with another team in the league.
So just to clarify, they recently changed the rules a couple of years ago, and I'm just reading about this last year, 2 years ago, the NFL changed the IR with return designation so that you no longer have to designate the player who will get designated at the time they are placed on the list. Now teams can bring back any 2 players they've placed on IR at any time after the 8-week mandate. Yeah, they've messed with the rules so much recently to make it even more confusing.
Yeah, it is super complex. But anyway, I think it's going to be an interesting thing to see what they do with Jones. I hope that we get news that they're going to keep him, or that they're going to like. I think he's a potentially really meaningful part of their future and on that line. And it was a super big bummer that he went down. It was good news that it wasn't a break, but them's the breaks. So, all right. What's next on our roster run through, Jeff?
Okay, we've gone through the entire offense. To me, other than wide receiver, the most interesting group this team's going to have, and it's the biggest question surrounding this team, is the defensive line. There's so many different ways you can go with this one. At some points in the past, they've had 7 guys. They can go anywhere up to 10 guys. There's a lot of interesting names here, whether it's the defensive tackle group, the ends, or even you can stash some guys at the linebacker position with Mingo and Martin. So let's just we'll start with the group at defensive end, defensive tackle. Okay, Brian, you've played with the numbers. What did you have?
Well, it is a tough one in that defensive tackle, they typically, last year they broke camp with 3 defensive tackles, and I don't see any way that you leave camp without 4 this year, and that's typically what they've done. They've had 4 and 4 interior, 4 edge. Sometimes they'll go 5 and 3 on edge to interior. But look, Jaron Reed's a lock. We know that. Are they going to cut Naz Jones?
No,
I don't think
he's a lock.
Shamar Stephen is young and relatively inexpensive, and they see him as a rotational guy on the interior. Tom Johnson, Nathan's brought up, and maybe we'll go in there about maybe he's at risk, but he's been their starting 3-tech, and Pete's been raving about him. I think he plays a pretty important role for that team, especially from a pressure perspective. You're not going to get much pressure from a guy like Shamar Stephen. And then Quentin Jefferson has typically been an interior guy, has been playing pretty well. So you're not going to keep 5, although they've started to play Jefferson on the edge in practice. So I don't know. That's where I have the biggest questions. I can't see them cutting Brandon Jackson on the edge. He's been one of their starters and actually has applied some decent pressure. So I end up with 8 players. Frank Clark, Jaron Reed, Rasheem Green, Naz Jones, Shamar Stephen, Tom Johnson, and then Quentin Jefferson and Brandon Jackson. That means Marcus Smith doesn't make it, means Poona Ford doesn't make it. And a guy that I thought played pretty damn well on Thursday, not just his touchdown, but I thought Joey Ivey, maybe just because I didn't know him, but I thought he was an interesting player. I'm kind of curious to see what happens with him going forward.
Yeah, he's a guy that probably isn't on anyone's 53-man projection, but he jumped out for sure. You mentioned it with Nathan. Nathan had a tweet this week that jumped off the screen to me. I was interested when he said, "Are we sure Tom Johnson's making this team?" And it was interesting because if you looked at the film, he didn't do anything to stand out. At least that was what I thought. But Pete's been raving about him all summer. Keeps mentioning the same thing about him, but Pete's raved about lots of people in the past. Nathan, what were your thoughts there?
Yeah, he just looked really underwhelming. And there's a lot more to being a 3-tech than just rushing the passer, but that's kind of his calling card, and I didn't see anything there that made me think, oh, this guy has to have a roster spot. especially considering the age and the depth of this position. Like, I ended up carrying 10 guys, which is well over what they usually do. And that was because I couldn't find like more than 4 linebackers that I wanted to keep. And so I'm going to squint at Marcus Smith and Jacob Martin and say that they're kind of a Sam too. And they're going to kind of play both, maybe have a little flexibility there. But yeah, like, you're not cutting Quentin Jefferson with the way he played, what we saw. I agree that Brandon Jackson looked good, so I have him in. But, like, 10 is a lot here. Like, they usually carry about 8. So, I don't know. This was a tough one for me, mostly because there's a lot here, and then trying to make up for some other spots where I thought they were pretty weak.
It's interesting you say that, because I had 10 too, and I thought that was probably the dumbest thing I did in my roster projection. I don't know if it'll necessarily happen, but I kept the same 8 Brian did, plus Marcus Smith and Poona Ford. So that's 5 defensive tackles and 5 ends. I don't know if they'll end up doing that, but as Nathan said, there's roster spots available, and I couldn't think of guys to get rid of. Ford's a guy who might not slip through the practice squad, and I'd rather keep him and maybe get rid of a linebacker or a cornerback. But 10's a lot. But if this group's going to generate a pass rush, we're going to need a rotation, and you're going to need a number of bodies. So we'll see if we're off right now. But, Evan, are you closer to Brian or closer to me and Nathan?
I'm actually closer to Nathan. I would go with 5 linebackers. Bobby Wagner, KJ Wright, Mingo, Griffin, and Jacob Martin. And then I would take 9 defensive linemen. I'd go Frank Clark, Jaron Reed, Green, Naz Jones, Shamar Stephen, Tom Johnson. And then my final 3 would be Brandon Jackson, Marcus Smith, and Poona Ford. I think those 3 extra guys give you the most potential in that group. And I'm just not sold on Quentin Jefferson yet. He struggled with a lot of injuries throughout his career. And who hyped him up the other day on the radio? Maybe it was Cliff Averill. But I think those 3 extra guys give you the most potential in that group. I really don't want to cut Brandon Jackson just because what we saw from his pass rush in preseason game 1. And I'm excited about Marcus Smith still. And then I'm really excited about Poona. So I hope he makes the roster.
Yeah, I think that group is going to change every week if we did this. Every preseason game we might have completely different views, or every training camp week. That's going to be.
Yeah, I will say that I have been influenced heavily by every season when I'm projecting the 53. I'm always thinking they're going to keep extra defensive linemen. Like, I always am looking at 9 or 10, and they break camp with 7. And if you look at their, since 2010, their average defensive line keep is 8.3. So, and that is the reason it's even over 8 is because 2013 they kept like 13. They kept like some insane number, and that included cutting Jay Howard. So like they were so stacked on the defensive line that year. Typically they're 8 or less. So I don't know if I see them doing 10.
I had the same thing because last year I did this and I ended up way short on linebackers and maybe safeties too. I don't remember. But those 2 spots, I don't know. You can't force me to keep more than 5 linebackers. Like, I won't do it. I refuse. I quit. I'll go. There's 4: Wagner, Wright, Mingo, Griffin. Okay. You want me to keep 5? I'll take DJ Alexander because you're asking me to take 5. I don't want Austin Kalitre on this team. I don't know who Jason Hall is.
Are you counting Martin as a defensive lineman or as a linebacker?
So I counted him as a defensive lineman because he is a defensive lineman, just like maybe they called J.D. McKissick a wide receiver, but that ain't what he is. But that's how I justified keeping the 10th guy, is that they want Martin to do some other stuff. He lined up as a linebacker or as a defensive end like almost all game.
I think that was a little bit misleading, and here's why. So the net of it is you and I and maybe Jeff aren't as far apart. I had Martin as a linebacker, and so I had him keeping 6 linebackers and 8 linemen. So it's similar.
Yeah.
But Martin has been running exclusively with the linebackers during camp and practice, and playing Sam almost exclusively during camp. And it's clear that they needed to see what he can do from a pass rush perspective, and so they were putting him in there. Similarly, the way they were playing Barkevius Mingo at end to see what he could do there. And they really see their Sam backers, like they saw Bruce Irvin, as someone who can switch between rush end and that Sam backer spot. So whatever we call him, I think we all see him making the roster. That's really what matters. And so I do think he has some potential at Sam backer. So unlike Marcus Smith, who when they tried to play him at Sam backer last year, he looked like a fish out of water. I think Martin actually has the physical skills to potentially play a little bit more off the line.
Martin was the guy that got steamrolled on that touchdown, though, right?
I don't know.
I believe it was Martin that he got just blasted and the guy went right into the end zone. Which
I don't know if I'd call that. You're being a little harsh on that one. Like they met and the guy had a lot of momentum.
He met and the offensive player kept going forward and he didn't. Like
okay.
I don't know. Like
I would base my assessment on his ability.
Sure. But also maybe not great. They had to try to chase down the guy when he's playing Sam. So I don't know.
Okay.
I think we all would hope that Jacob Martin's not a staple in their base goal line defense at any point this year.
Yeah,
I would hope so. But I guess the one debate there is DJ Alexander. If he was hyped up as a special teams guru, he would project, I guess, as the backup middle linebacker for Bobby Wagner unless he has shift. I don't think Calitro's in the mix yet. Maybe I'm wrong about him.
I thought that was the one.
Yeah. So the one debate is, do they have to have a guy as that backup inside, or does KJ just shift over and then you keep the four linebackers and you have the guys as the outside linebackers? Because when DJ Alexander had to play inside linebacker when Bobby went down, I think it was that Jacksonville game, he looked pretty terrible.
He's so bad.
But they don't like to move KJ. Like, they could have done that.
Yeah.
And they chose to put him out there. So I don't really agree with it, but they seem to want that backup middle linebacker to leave KJ where he is.
But if it was an extended absence, that might be a different answer, right? Like,
I don't know. I mean, Bobby's asked to do a lot more. Not that DJ Alexander is any kind of amazing athlete or anything, but that's definitely playing to KJ's weak spots. And so, like, leaving KJ where he's very, very good, I kind of get it.
Yeah. And we all remember KJ's first start of his career was at middle linebacker against the San Francisco 49ers. But, I think Shaquem Griffin changes the equation a little bit, because I think they actually have a reasonable, higher potential guy that could be coming out as a backup will. I just didn't see DJ Alexander impacting special teams the way I was really hoping he would last year. I thought I can't really remember a play he made that stood out to me. And special teams players should pretty much stand out. Like, you notice them on those plays. So I think he's a little bit at risk. And if he doesn't make it, then maybe you are looking at someone like Austin Calitro having a chance. But the guy that I would call out, scored really well on special teams, both from what I saw as well. PFF had him as Pro Football Focus had him really highly rated, was Emmanuel Beal. Undrafted rookie, athletic linebacker. He's another guy to watch on the inside that we'll see how that plays out the last few weeks of the preseason.
Yeah, it's an interesting name no one's brought up yet. So moving on, that's the linebacker group. Evan hasn't contributed in a while, so we'll let Evan start this section. Another interesting group that we talked about earlier in the show with Flowers in the first segment is cornerback. Historically, they've bounced between 5 and 6 corners. Maxwell's been banged up. Dante Johnson's just starting to get into the swing of things. Obviously, Shaq Griffin's making this team. Nico Thorpe is banged up, and the bottom of their rosters that they've always valued special teams. If they need to save money in a way, Thorpe's the guy you can get rid of to save some money at the bottom of your roster. And then Akeem King, Evan mentioned earlier. So is Akeem King on your roster? And how do you break down this 5 or 6 guys, and who are they?
I think I take 6 players, and those 6 players are Shaq Griffin, Justin Coleman, Trey Flowers, obviously. I think Maxwell's making this team. I think he might even be the starter at the beginning of the season. Actually, I would expect that. I think Akeem King is a guy to watch up and coming. I think he played super well in preseason game 1. He's a guy I will definitely be watching in preseason game 2. And I do actually think that Nico Thorpe makes this roster over Dante Johnson, Brian's favorite cornerback on this roster.
I have a question for you, Evan, though. As I was going through the roster, there was definitely places they could have saved some money. Tom Johnson, Shamar Stephen, and some of these other veterans. Do they need to? Like, is there a value in them saving money this year where you think that's a factor?
I really don't think it's a factor. Right now, we're dealing with a lot of cap space. They're like, I think sitting around 10, 11, 12 million right now. Next year, we're talking 60 plus million. They're not pinching pennies. They're really not. This could look different after a Frank Clark extension or a Tyler Lockett extension, but it sounds like they might wait till the end of the season to make those two happen. But to answer your question, they don't need to penny pinch right now.
Because Nico Thorpe is a big impact player on special teams, and there's a big cap savings for him to go. I don't think he's a great cornerback, but that was one of my questions.
It's like 1 or 2 million they saved by cutting him. I really don't see the benefits outweighing the, I don't see that situation happening.
Okay. Jeff, did we lose you? He's like frozen in time. Nathan,
Yeah, he's frozen.
Yeah, so Nathan, let's go cornerback and safety. Run through your keep on cornerback and safety.
So Griffin, Coleman, Maxwell, I think. Thorpe, I've got in there. Flowers, I think, is in there. And then I kept both King and Johnson because, again, just like linebacker, these safeties, I don't know what to do with them. I mean, you've got McDougald, Hill, Tedrick Thompson. Mo Alexander probably makes the team, but I think he's still hurt. I don't know if he's back out there yet. And then after that is TJ Mutcherson and Lorenzo Jerome. Like, I don't think those are guys that make this team. Maybe I'm missing something with Mutcherson or Jerome and what they can do special teams wise, but I went with an extra cornerback because I couldn't bring myself to keep a fifth safety.
Yeah, so you've got 4 safeties, 6 corners?
4 safeties, 7 corners.
7 corners. Whoa.
It's a lot of corners. It's too many corners.
There's some kind of,
that's what I did.
Shape joke to make here, but I'm not as good enough at geometry to do that. So, so wait, I need to know the 7 again. Griffin, Coleman, Flowers, Maxwell.
Oh, you know what I did? I kept 52 offensive and defensive players and not. So, I'm gonna take. I've heard a lot of stuff between King and Johnson. I'm gonna take your word for it, Brian, and I'm gonna put King over Johnson. Or I'm sorry, vice versa, other way around, Johnson over King.
Interesting. Yeah, and the piece here is like I'm really interested in Johnson. I need to see him on the field and see what he looks like with Seattle. To really, like, right now I have King over Johnson. He hasn't been on the field. We'll see what happens there. After this game, assuming he plays, Johnson may be off the roster from my perspective. So we'll see. Right now I have him making it. I have him making it over Nico Thorpe, mainly because I don't think Nico Thorpe's a very good corner. I think he's an excellent special teams player, but
I actually disagree there. I always thought he looked passable when he was put out there. Not a guy that I saw a lot of upside from, but not a guy that looked like he was embarrassing himself out there either.
No, that he's not a DJ Alexander, right? Like he is capable of playing the corner spot, but not well. I don't think he's like you saw him come into the Falcons playoff game a couple years ago, and it was ugly. Like, I mean, everybody was kind of ugly in that game, but I don't know. So we'll see. I'd love to have Thorpe around because I like what he does on special teams. I have them only keeping 4 safeties. I don't know how you keep another one. I'm with you on that one, Nathan. So I've got 6 corners, 4 safeties. Overall, I have them keeping 24 on defense and actually, wait, is that right? I think I have them keeping 24 on defense and 26 on offense, which is what they did last year as well. And then, the last one I'd throw out there is Michael Dixon, Janikowski, Tyler Ott. I think those are locks. I'm curious if you guys see anything differently there.
Nope.
Interesting. So, it seems like the places where there were any real question, like defensive line, wide receiver, a little bit on running back, although I don't think it was that controversial there. So offensive line, defensive line, receiver, those seem like the most controversial ones in terms of what's going to happen there.
I'm so curious to see what they do with Amara Darboh. I know we've talked about it a million times, but it'll be really interesting to look back on this receiver room in about 3 to 4 weeks.
Can you guys remember a 3rd round pick that has been so quiet? I'm actually going to pull up the Seahawks draft history really quick, but
David Green.
I mean, couldn't you say Nick Vannett?
No, not Darboh level quiet. Darboh, so last year's 3rd round picks were Shaquille Griffin, Delano Hill, Nazir Jones, and Amara Darboh.
Hill's done more in the preseason, but not a lot less quiet than Darboh. If we're being, I love the guy, but he just hasn't really shown up.
But look at CJ. The year before, CJ Cruz, Nick Vannett, Reese Odiombo. I'm not saying whether they're good or not. That's a different question.
Mm-hmm.
But Darboh has done nothing.
I guess Darboh had 8 catches last year. It's really though. Who's been quieter, Hill or Darboh?
I think Darboh.
Hill has more hype, but what has he actually done? He didn't do the equivalent of catching 8 balls last year, did he?
Yeah. I think he's playing behind 2 Hall of Fame players. It's a really different situation.
It's a totally different deal. Yeah,
really different situation, and he's he really, from my perspective, I think he even was a decent player in this past preseason game. I think his last preseason game was better than any preseason game Darboh's had, and he's had more than one of those. So to me, that's a standout. Year before 2016 was 3rd round. 2015 Tyler Lockett was the 3rd round pick. For that, Jordan Hill. For that, Russell Wilson is a pretty good 3rd round pick. John Moffitt back in 2011 didn't.
Unfortunately, not quiet enough. But we could all do with John Moffitt being a lot quieter.
True, it's true. Those are the 3rd round picks in the Pete Carroll. I don't think I've ever seen one that has been. I don't know. I think he's like the 9th or 10th receiver right now on the depth chart. So
he is not good. And you know what's it's not that big of a surprise either. He's kind of athletic, and he's got he definitely looks the part in terms of build and all that. But it's not like he was amazing at Michigan, and there's a lot of caveats that go with that. But is anyone surprised that Darboh has just completely been non-existent and ghosted? I don't think so.
They brought him in because they thought his route running would transfer well. And you're right. And the thing they talked about when they had those great drafts was unique qualities. What are his unique qualities? He's not that fast. He's not that athletic. It's not smooth. He doesn't have great hands, it seems like. I haven't seen any unique qualities.
Yeah, I really am going back all the way to David Green. That's the last 3rd round pick in 2005. It's even Wayne Hunter in 2003. He started a fair number. He started a game or so. Anyway, 2002 3rd round pick Chris Richard. Anyway. So I could go on. Yeah, Evan, I think that's a good call. I'm definitely curious to see. And Darboh did have one training camp practice where he was the player of the day. And I talked about it and wrote about it because it stood out. I hope he does. I hope he pops and all of a sudden he's just everything that you'd hope a 3rd round pick would be. But right now he's got a huge hill to climb. All right, guys. I think it's Evan's bedtime here, and we've gone a little longer than normal. So thanks everybody that's stuck around. I do want to mention for folks that we are going to do something. We had our live show last week during the game. Not everybody can make it on the team to do it this week. I'm going to host the show, and I'm going to allow. I think it's going to be up to 9 patrons, unless anyone else on the show ends up joining. But 9 patrons to join the hangout with me live, and we'll talk about the game. We'll watch the game together. I will try to do a little bit more play-by-play because I heard that it was hard to time up your TVs without knowing exactly where we were with the game. So, call that out. Hang out. If you're not already a patron, go to patreon.com, patreon.com/hawkblogger. Sign up there, and let's hang out. Should be fun this Saturday. Looking forward to it, guys. All right. With that, I'm going to say goodnight and go Hawks, everybody.